How do you think it developed your character?
He and I had a bus stop.
Were they only drilling vertical holes back then? Okay, hey Tom.
Hi, Yel.
So we're doing a special today, whereby the title is called Journey of a Lifetime. We're gonna reflect on some periods in your life and how it has brought us to where we are today with ED projects. First of all, I would like to share, and this is the basis of it, I'll share three pictures with you. And if you can just tell me how you felt in those situations, through what life cycles you were going through, what you were experiencing, and just in general, what sort of memories the picture brings up.
Okay. Okay. I remember that well. I think I was about 16 years old then, and it was at the Spring Show in Dublin. I grew up in Ireland on a small mixed farm. My father got his first tractor in 1954. A lot of things changed in Ireland in 1954. It was also when we got electricity on the farm. We got milking machines in the farm, which was a big, big blessing. You only knew how different it was when sometimes the electricity would get cut off and everybody had to go out milking by hand again. That wasn't the good. So,
Do you reckon this is also the moment you sort of fell in love with engineering?
well, I was always extremely critical. I wanted to change everything. My father was definitely not into that stuff.
Even though you grew up in Ireland, you had a very distinctive feeling of like, hey, this is not a place where I would like to stay for the rest of my life. And you were quite inquisitive about, hey, what else is going on?
Ireland there was no television. At least we didn't have any television. But my mother used to read to us a lot. But me being the eldest, I could choose the books. So I always choose like adventure stories and stuff like that. Anything with waves and ships on it, that's me. I'm taking that home, and mother would read these things to us. Then as I grew older, I got more frustrated. I went into long distance running because my legs are so short. Sprinting was not for me. And this type of stuff. And then got me into boxing. And it was all part of frustration. I felt that there was more. And then it got to the stage where Vincent Collins, somebody that I knew very well in my earlier days, he went with a drilling company to Libya. And he came back, and I just met him, and he talked about what he was doing, and that sort of excited me. And I said, now that's exactly what I want to do. So
What part of it got you excited?
I think the fact of traveling, getting out of the country, I felt that it was sounded very manly, stewer, so to speak. It was adventurous, and I thought I would love to give this a try. And
And this year was?
68.
Okay, so that was the first time you also actually started with the oil and gas.
It was the first time I left Ireland, actually. So, and
Did you go to?
we went first to Great Yarmouth, and I remember how disappointed my father was when I told him I was leaving. Everybody was disappointed, but my mother understood. I went to Great Yarmouth and went on this Amoco A platform in the Lemon Bank. And I thought that was the weirdest structure I had ever seen in my entire life.
Must be quite something.
It was really something. And it was also my first helicopter flight as well. You know, that was a bit exciting as well. I said, well, wow, you know what I mean? This is great. So started off as a roustabout, of course, and offloading boats and scraping paint off handrails and painting them again and washing the pump room and all that sort of stuff. And then eventually there was an very big turnover of people out there. People didn't like it. They would come for a few days and quit. And so
it was a tough environment.
It was a tough environment. And there was a Dutch guy called Nick Velt, and he was tough, man. This guy also came from Libya.
Yeah.
And a big rough guy came from Rotterdam. And so nobody would work for Nick. And so therefore You know, sometimes he would come in, get me out of bed, and ask me if I would come up and work on the rig floor. So I did. And it wasn't too long that, you know, he and I had a bust up. And then,
What happened?
well, he was calling me Paddy and Paddy and Paddy, so I got pissed off with him, and I says to him, "My name is not Paddy," you know. And then he came over to me and he says, "Well, what is your name?" I says, "Tom." Well, he said, "Put it on your hat." So okay, and so eventually he and I became quite good friends because he would pull me out of bed at all hours of the night to do a double shift because somebody quit.
What was he doing? Was he the driller?
Yeah, he was a driller. Yeah, the driller that I really was working on with the shift was a guy called Nelson Lowe, and I met Nelson later on in the Middle East.
Okay.
So TJ Carr was the tool pusher, and then a group of us heard about IDC, International Drilling Company, and they were looking for people to go to West Africa during the Nigerian Civil War. And we all got a train to London, 3 of us, and we went to have an interview. And 2 of us were accepted, and Harry McDevitt wasn't, and later on Harry got killed on that rig. Then we went to West Africa. So when I was leaving the Amakaway platform, TJ Carr came on the heli deck and he says, "Newman," he says, "if you ever want to come back, call me Collect." You know, in his big Texan voice. So then we went to West Africa and became a derrickman and assistant driller out there. And then this Nigerian Civil War finished in 1970. That company was taken over by the offshore drilling company. So then that's when I was moved to Bahrain and drilling in the Sheikh and Zakim fields out of Abu Dhabi.
Must be quite something. You've been traveling already.
It was traveling, and in West Africa it was a month on, month off.
Yeah. Would you go back to Ireland every time?
Yeah, I went back to Ireland every time. Then in the Middle East, it was, you got a month's holiday once a year. That was different. But we worked 2 weeks on and 1 week off, and with the week off you were flown back to Bahrain.
How long did you stay out for in the Middle East?
Sorry, it was Middle East, it was a month on, 2 weeks off, sorry. And then in Bahrain, it was 2 weeks on, 1 week off. Out of Great Yarmouth, one thing I should have mentioned is that I would do 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and then sometimes I would work on the paint crew on my second week. So you were only allowed to do a 5 week, but that was the longest you would be allowed to do.
How do you think it developed your character over that period of time?
I always say, when people ask me where do I grow up, I just think, yeah, physically in Ireland, mentally it was in the Middle East, but I have to say that time in West Africa was also an eye-opening period, and I knew then that I wasn't going home. Yeah.
So, I'm also very curious how you fell in love with directional drilling.
It always interested me. I was when I eventually got to driller in, I do believe it was 72. I became a driller on the offshore enterprise, again working in the Sheikh and Zakim fields.
Were they only drilling vertical holes back then, or
They were originally they were drilling vertical holes.
Okay.
And then later on they started drilling deviated wells. Everybody thought that 45 degrees was a physical boundary because of hole cleaning and whatever. And of course, we had to beef up the rigs in those days to do directional drilling, you know, from a 8-line block to a 12-line block, this type of stuff.
What was the limiting factor, mostly?
Unlike today, we didn't have a top drive. So, you know, back reaming was not something you could do with a Kelly. You know, you could try it, but it just didn't work. You know, you could try to lock the bushings, but it never worked. It would just pick the rotary table up. You know, in those days when I was working with my opposite guy, Ike Landry at the time, and Ike was an old guy from Mississippi, and he taught me a hell of a lot, just about everything I know actually. And I could say, "Tom, there's no point in drilling 1 foot a hole if you can't get out of it." So dog legs was a big thing.
Yeah.
Mud wasn't great. And in those days, we drilled just with seawater down to the 13 3/8 casing point, and then after that we mudded up, and continued on drilling from there. Yeah.
So you moved up all the way to driller?
Well, I was always interested in directional drilling, and that's why I always took notes. I still have some of those notebooks where I was the build rates and on what they were doing, and I was extremely interested in this. And then the driver came around to our apartment on a Sunday morning, and we weren't supposed to go to the rig until Monday.
Yeah.
And he says, "You have to come to the office." And first thing was, what the hell did I do wrong now? And so we went to the office, and this says, "Your rig has been plugged and abandoned. You're going to pick it up under tow tomorrow. There's a blowout in Dubai. The Sedco Rig 7 has blown out. And they're going to drill 2 relief wells into that blowout. The Ile-de-France will be drilling one, and the Offshore 55 will be drilling another one." So
That's, by the way, that's a perfect link to the second picture, which I do believe is actually that actual rig that you're looking at now.